Hello everyone, this is Overmind, and welcome back to another StarCraft 2 replay analysis. I've not gotten to do an analysis video in quite some time, so I'm pleased to be able to get back to it. Let's go ahead and start off by introducing our featured player of the evening. Spawning down on the bottom side of Antigua Shipyard in blue, our Zerg player is Lazy Rocker. And Lazy Rocker is someone who I was fortunate enough to run into on Reddit. He's someone who is very new to our game, only played for about a week or so, and was nice enough to send me a replay because he's been having some troubles on the ladder, he's been having some troubles with the game, he's just having a lot of losses, and that is what most people do when they first start playing the game. However, hopefully we will be able to help him out and give him some pointers and tips. Now, as long as I'm introducing people, spawning up at the top side of our map, we have our red player. This is Pazonkadonk. He's been nice enough to join us for the duration of this cast. However, we're not going to focus on him too much. Just know that he's here, and he's the enemy. Now, Lazy Rocker, the first thing I want to go ahead and note is that your rally point is not set correctly. I don't know if this is because this is an older map and it didn't auto-set it for you, or if you actually changed it and messed it up somehow. We're seeing a couple drones sort of wander themselves over to about the 2 o'clock position in our base relative to our main hatchery. So here goes one now. And you definitely want to make sure that your workers are heading off to mine those minerals when you want them to. So make sure your rally points are set correctly. As far as openings, we went spawning pool, into hatchery, into extractor, and we're building drones, and that's completely and totally fine. I'm not going to go into too many of the nitty-gritty details of everything, because this is a player who has played for about a week now, and there's no need to stress over the same things that I would go, ugh, man, our GM player didn't do this and micro his workers, ugh. We're not going to focus on that. We're mostly going to focus on macro and broad stroke concepts. So, moving right along, we have our queen being produced pretty well on point. We have drones mining gas so that we can get zergling speed and get our upgraded units and tech further along in the game. I want to go ahead and note that we have an overlord out here, which is good. We also have an overlord here to scout our enemy, which is something that new players so often do not do. The only critique I really have of this is that the overlords took this sort of long path. They went all the way around the edge of the map. Since this is a 2-player spawn map, I don't really think that's necessary. This overlord could have flown right over into Pazonkadonk's base and seen what was up right away. However, scouting, definitely something you want to continue to do. And that's great. Good job, Lazy Rocker. Excellent. We see he's made a handful of zerglings, but that he's also producing an extra queen for his expansion down here, and he's making overlords. He is pretty close to that 28 mark where a lot of zergs just get that supply block, but he's not going to fall victim to that. He has 52 supply, he's only taking up 26 of it. He shouldn't need to worry about being supply blocked anytime soon. His zerglings are heading out across the map, and he's getting zergling speed. I want to note that running zerglings here to the front of this ramp is actually great. These zerglings will be able to spot anything coming out of this base and alert him so that he can make response units. Now, a lot of the new Zerg players will ask things like, when should I drone? The very, very general rule that I often give people is until you hit 70 drones, and that's a sort of soft number if you feel more comfortable with more or less. That's certainly a negotiable number, but 70 is a good sort of starting benchmark. You also want to make units and not drones when you know that there is an attack coming, which you would know by virtue of things like the zerglings at the front of this base, or when you're gearing up for an attack yourself. We do have a Roach Warren going down. Roaches are a very legit unit versus Protoss, and I've lost many a game to said unit, especially around the time that I would be looking at taking my third. So there we have our Roach Warren finishing up. We have a hatchery mutating into a lair, and I want to go ahead and pause, because while we do have a lot of Zerg players who go hatchery into lair and don't get their third expansion, What we're actually going to see Lazy Rocker do is just never take a third base. And that's a huge problem. We'll see other things that we can point out, but if there is one thing that I could pick from this replay to say, Lazy Rocker, please do this differently, it would be to take a third around this time. He has 460 minerals. If we look over at the larva, he does have enough to make drones and spend all this money, which would be a good thing to do, of course. But around the time that the lair finishes up, if you go lair before your third base, is around the time that we see a lot of Zerg players get their third, and he's just never going to take one, which is kind of unfortunate, because, to be quite honest, a lot of his opening was pretty dang good. So let's go ahead and look at the rest of the game. I'm going to speed along again because I don't want to be too picky about little things that happen in the game. I definitely want to hit the big points, the third being probably my biggest point in the game. We're going to see that there aren't too many things going on in the way of upgrades, which is kind of too bad, but let's face it, new players never get upgrades. Upgrades are pretty great, Lazy Rocker. If you want to get upgrades, that would be the thing to do. Definitely make sure that your rally points are set correctly, that we don't have drones running around lazily hanging out in our base. I also want to note that we have a large number of overlords heading here for the middle of the map. Having good map vision with your overlords is awesome. However, you don't want them all clustered up. Any overlord that's spread out on the map runs the risk of dying, and losing one overlord to let you gain valuable intel about what your opponent is doing is great. What we're going to see here is Zonkadonk killing for overlords, and that's not what we want necessarily. We also want to make sure that we position our overlords intelligently. These ones way over here on the side of the map are relatively safe unless something comes by, and in that case we definitely want to know about it. Having an overlord, say here, sort of near this area where the overlord can float safely away, would be fine, and would also let us know if our opponent was taking a third, so that would be a good thing. Having an overlord here would give us vision of this airspace by our Protoss base in case any air units were going to fly out, and then we'd know something about his tech. But overall, we don't want overlords sitting in the middle of the map where they can be easily reached by general Protoss ground forces like stalkers, and we don't want them all clustered up. We did see that these Zerglings did die over here, and we could certainly stand to replace them with additional units so that we knew about this move out. At this point, we do see response units being produced, we do see Hydras, we do see that roaches have been built, and roaches are a very legit unit, again, versus Protoss. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I want to also note that we have a Spire up here. Feeding a Spire, a Roach Warren, and a Hydralisk Den off of 2 bases is going to be pretty much impossible. Here we see some Overlords being killed off, however these ones are saved by virtue of this cliff, so this is not a placement that I'm too concerned about. Possibly could be fewer clustered up again, though. And here we see DTs moving out across the map, and boy isn't this just the bane of every new player's existence, because if you look at it, we'll go ahead and switch to the Units tab. We don't have anything as far as units that can detect. Switching to the Structures tab, nothing there either. So we're going to have DTs move into our base and essentially be able to kill without anything to stop them. Here we have some additional Hydralisks popping out. At this point, I would definitely want to recommend getting some extra intel on what your opponent is doing, because at this point we're seeing Lazy Rocker produce pretty much only units, and we definitely want to see him growing, to see him expanding, and all of that good jazz. Now, here we have our DTs, they're killing off our base, it's taking a long time to make our ever wonderful Overseer. Our Overseer does pop out just in time for our base to die. We move up here and kill off those DTs, however those are pretty good DTs since they've killed off one of our only 2 bases. So now we're in a spot where we can't produce larvae nearly fast enough to spend our money. We're also distance mining with a lot of our drones, which is too bad. Here we have a big attack, send out all of your army, and this is not necessarily going to work out. Pushing out into this midsection might be okay, especially since we can scare the stalkers back, get some map vision. In fact, if instead of heading to this front area, which is pretty well defended from Protoss, and attacking there, we did a bit of scouting out and, say, sniped off this third base, I think that would be a lot better of a place to be. However, we have cannons who are going to get shots as Lazy Rocker moves up this ramp. We have Stalkers, which have a much longer range than our Roaches. We have Hydra was being bunched up. I'm not going to talk too much about this aside from saying that this game didn't go well, and probably shouldn't have been something that we were worried about too much. I do want to note that during that, the production tab was pretty much empty. You definitely want to make sure that you're producing things while you're attacking. So this base only got rebuilt as we sort of came back and were like, oh, we attacked and lost everything, better rebuild. And that's pretty well too late. To be quite honest, I would have liked that attack a lot more if he was like, I'll take a third and rebuild my base and attack. Because at least then he would have stand to gain something from it, even if it was just to hit his own coming back. And at this point, the game is pretty well lost. We have 5 larvae we can build units with. That's not going to be able to hold us off at all. And at this point, Lazy Rocker is kind of done. So, if I were to point out some things that I really wanted Lazy Rocker to work on, it would be things like continuing to do your scouting and map vision, because that's quite good, and definitely making sure that you take a third. I want to go ahead and note that if you're playing versus Protoss or Terran, you should be usually up 1 base on that player. That's pretty normal to be 1 base ahead of them. So here we see Pazonkadonk is just placing his 3rd base, and would be starting to saturate it if the game weren't over. And at this point, we would expect Lazy Rocker, if he were sort of on par with Pazonkadonk, to be placing his 4th base and just starting to think about sending things to mine from it. So that's the sort of mindset that we want to have as we think about expanding. The composition was not terrible. It could use some refining. Certainly we wouldn't be able to power that set of units on the number of bases that we had, but he's certainly doing a good job of not only making Zerglings or low-tier units. We could do a bit more in terms of upgrading the units that we're making. And I know that I've said a lot of things, but I want to go ahead and emphasize, just go ahead and take 1 or 2 of these things, not all of them. Don't try and work on everything at once. Just take 1 or 2 things and work on those things, and you'll get better really, really quick. It's a quick learning curve. I'm sure you'll be doing well in another week or 2. Start to win games. Blizzard does try and match you up with people around a similar skill level, so you won't be losing all the time. You'll be winning and losing about half the time. So an equal chance of doing either. Thank you so much to Lazy Rocker for sending this in. If there are any other players out there in the Bronze, Silver, or Gold League who would like to see me analyze a replay, please feel free to send it to NoobCrafted@gmail.com and put replay analysis in the subject line, or something to indicate that you want me to analyze said replay. If you just have a game that you thought was awesome and you want to share it with me and have me cast it, go ahead and send it to that same email. It's noobcrafted@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to put that up on my channel. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Lazy Rocker, good luck out there. Everyone else, have fun, and I'll see you on the ladder.